Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Thursday, May 4th at 10:05, and we are here for an allowable ex parte communication briefing from the Public Service Authority, also known as Santee Cooper. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Carol Lee Williams. Here in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. I'm going to recognize our staff counsel, Ms. Clausen, to read the docket.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Today is May 4th, 2023, and we are here in the Commission's hearing room pursuant to an amended notice of request for allowable ex parte communication briefing in ND 2023-14-E from the Public Service Commission of South Carolina per Directive Order number 2023-206, extending invitation to the South Carolina Public Service Authority, Santee Cooper, regarding grid resilience grant program under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Section 40101D. This matter has been noticed on the Commission's website as required by South Carolina Code Annotated Section 58-3-260 C6.
Thank you, Ms. Clausen. Gentlemen, it's nice to have you here this morning. Welcome. Would you mind introducing yourselves?
Thank you very much.
You need to, if you would hit the button at the bottom to turn that on. Let's see if, sorry, we didn't, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hello, thank you very much for allowing us to be here today. My name is Greg Edwards. I am Associate General Counsel at Santee Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. There you go.
And good morning. My name is Chris Wagner, and I am Director of Transmission Planning, Research, and Development at Santee Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And who's here for as the designee for the Office of Regulatory Staff?
Donna Rainey on behalf of ORS. I'll be serving as the designee of the executive.
Okay, you're going to have to talk a little louder, Ms. Rainey.
Donna Rainey, serving as the designee of the executive director of ORS. And here with me today is Joshua Austin and Ben Muschin.
Welcome, thank you. I'm going to recognize Ms. Clausen to give some instructions, and Ms. Rainey, I'll come back to you to see if we've left anything out, if you don't mind. Ms. Clausen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject matter notice to be discussed today relates to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina per Directive Order number 2023-206, extending an invitation to the South Carolina Public Service Authority, Santee Cooper, briefing on grid resilience grant program under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Section 40101D. I would remind everyone that this is a briefing and not a hearing. The briefing must be conducted in compliance with the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-3-260C, and the requirements of that statute are, in part, that the allowable ex parte briefing be confined to the subject matter which has been noticed. Therefore, I would ask the presenters, commissioners, and staff to please refrain from discussing any matters not related to the specific topics. The statute prohibits any presenter, commissioners, or commission staff from requesting or giving any commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner as to an ultimate issue which either is or is likely to come before the commission. I would also ask the presenters, staff, and commissioners to refrain from referencing any report, article, statute, or document of any kind that are not included in today's presentation. A copy of any document which is referenced during the briefing must be provided to the Office of Regulatory Staff for inclusion into the record, which will be certified to the Chief Clerk of the Commission, Ms. Jocelyn Boyd. If anyone during the course of this briefing exceeds the scope or does not comply with or fails to conduct themselves within the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-3-260 governing allowable ex parte briefings, it is expected that a contemporaneous objection will be made. And finally, everyone in attendance today must sign in or register. Everyone in the hearing room must read, sign, and return the form which you were given at the door, or the form which will be provided to you for your virtual appearance, which will include instructions and the deadline for return. It is required by law for each attendee to certify that the requirements contained in Section 58-3-260C have been complied with in this presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Clausen. Ms. Rainey, do you have any additional instructions for us before we begin? That's fine, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Ms. Clausen has outlined most of the requirements of South Carolina Code Annotated 58-3-260C, but there are a few points that I just want to reiterate. One, a reminder that all communications are limited to the scope that was noticed, which is the Grid Resilience Grant program under the IIJA. Also, I ask that all presenters, commissioners, and staff refrain from referencing any information that is not included in today's presentation. All materials that are referenced or that are not included in the presentation must be provided to ORS as part of the certification process. The presentation does not appear to have any confidential designations, so I ask that all presenters refrain from mentioning any confidential information during this briefing. And lastly, all forms must be completed and returned in accordance with SC Code Annotated 58-3-260C. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. It's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid before we begin, but I think we've finished that now. And Mr. Edwards and Mr. Wagner, I'll turn it over to you to proceed as you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Again, it's a pleasure to be here today. We are here to talk about the South Carolina Grid Resilience Grant Program that is going to be administered through Santee Cooper. And we have a few general topics we'd like to discuss with you. Of course, we're happy to answer any questions that you all may have at the end of the presentation. We're going to do an overview of the legislative and the law itself for a bit, and then talk a little bit about the Santee Cooper program that we're putting in place to assist those who are eligible to apply for the grants themselves. We have provided a link to a couple of the documents that we'll be discussing today, as well as a couple of copies. You will note, I would ask that you all see that the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is the official title of the actual bill that we'll be discussing. A more general and more common name has been associated with the same exact statute, and that's the Biparty Infrastructure Law, or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the BIL. The two are interchangeable. They're referencing the same document or the same piece of legislation. The BIL has become more of the commonly used term to describe that legislation. So you will see the BIL referenced throughout our presentation today. So the reason that this program was created, it was intended to create a funding opportunity and to encourage increased safety to help reduce the economic burden that can occur through disasters, basically through primarily weather disasters, but other natural disasters that could occur throughout the country. The statute is written generally so that each state, or if there is it's referenced as an Indian tribe in the legislation, can build the program and conform the program more towards those particular natural disasters that affect either that region or that state more so than others. So, for example, Nevada, Oregon, others are more interested perhaps in wildfires than we would be here in South Carolina. We obviously are more concerned about hurricanes, wind, flooding type weather events. The statute is written broadly enough to allow those states to address those types of issues that directly affect us. In addition, the total statute itself has about $5 billion designated for all grants throughout that statute. The one we are here talking about today, what's referred to as Section 40101D, has actually been funded for about half of that amount. So you'll notice that about $2.3 billion has been allocated to that one section. Now that's for the entire program, and it is a 5-year grant. So that $2.3 billion is divided up for 5 years. The first year is approximately $459 million. Again, for the entire country and any other tribe that may be interested in seeking those funds. We have already received the amount from the Department of Energy that the state of South Carolina will be receiving. That is $5.2 million for year one, $5.191 for year two. That is just for the state of South Carolina. And we do keep each year of the 5 years separate. It is a separate annual funding opportunity. So it's just those 2 years that have been designated thus far. There is a 15% cost match. So Santee Cooper will be providing a 15% cost match on that year one amount. That comes out to $781,000. So that's in addition to the amount that has been designated for the state of South Carolina. There's a 5% technical assistance amount that Santee Cooper can apply for that go towards the cost of the program itself, the Santee Cooper internal costs for that program, limited to 5%. That would be true for any state that is administering this grant program. The way those funds got calculated, the way the federal government, the Department of Energy, calculated those funds was based on a 5-part formula. And you can see that there. So each state does not get an equal amount of funding. It's based on those 5 elements that determine the amount that each state will receive. And that formula is reviewed each year. So the years, as you can see, from years 1 and 2 for the state of South Carolina do not always equate to the same amount. In the statute, there is a wide range of potential, what is referred to as investments, but potential projects that those who would be considering to apply, what we refer to as sub-awardees, may designate as the type of investment that they may want to proceed forward with. There's a long list. It was not meant to be a complete list. These were just general thoughts, general types of investments that the Department of Energy thought would be useful and helpful to the program. There are specific areas that are not eligible for this particular grant, that is cybersecurity, and what we've referred to as operational upgrades. It also says these funds cannot be used to create new generation facilities. That's what that means. So it was very specific in its limitation, but very broad in what could be applied for. There's also a very short list of what can be considered an eligible entity. So only the entities, the electric grid operators, the electricity storage operators, electricity generators, transmission owners and operators, distribution providers, fuel suppliers, and other relevant entities, those are the only entities per the statute that are eligible to seek these subawards. And that will be part of the process that we review as Santee Cooper reviews those applications as they come in each year. There is a requirement per the statute that those entities who are eligible to participate do have a matching requirement. And the amount that they must match with their requested award depends on the size of the entity itself. If it fits into a category designated as small entity, then they must match 1/3 of the amount of the award they are seeking. So there is a matching requirement. Just as there was a matching requirement on behalf of Santee Cooper, there's a matching requirement for each eligible entity as they apply for these funds each year. So a little bit about the role of Santee Cooper. Santee Cooper is acting on behalf of the state of South Carolina. The funds that are received, that $5 million worth of funds each year, do not go into the general revenue or the general accounts for Santee Cooper. They will be held in a separate account, administered separately, solely for this program. Any funds that are not used on an annual basis, a year-by-year basis, actually get returned back to the Department of Energy, to the federal government. Santee Cooper doesn't keep these funds. They're not eligible to be used for any reason other than this grant, and used by the subawardees who eventually are deemed awarded these amounts. So this is not a program to help fund Santee Cooper or any specific Santee Cooper function or other operational need. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Wagner.
Good morning. So I'm going to walk through the program objectives, both the overall broad program objectives outlined in the legislation, as well as the more specific South Carolina objectives that Greg mentioned that align with the broader objectives. So the program objectives is outlined in the legislation are directed really toward improving resilience of the electric system, improving access to low-cost energy and increased electrification, increasing renewables and distributed energy resources from a resiliency perspective, decreasing carbon emissions, creating jobs, and positively impacting underserved and disadvantaged communities. The four specific objectives that were established for the South Carolina program narrative align with those broader federal objectives. So each of these anticipated project types, as Mr. Edwards described previously, are not all inclusive. They're intended to be examples and of projects that might qualify under each objective. Each project application will be evaluated to assess its benefit and alignment with the broader objectives, and also the value it brings to the communities that it affects. So objective one is really it's centered around increasing monitoring and control and overall system awareness or situational awareness during extreme weather events. Example projects may include expansion of distribution automation and management systems, the installation of equipment in the field to enhance line monitoring and remote control capability, also the installation of remote controlled sectionalizing devices to isolate faults in a way that allows maybe more efficient restoration of load during severe weather events, to include potential automated systems. Program objective number two is centered around hardening or adaptation of the electric system during severe weather events. Example projects here may include conversion of overhead lines to underground, upgrades to overhead facilities. For example, for lines, it may be redesigning lines for higher wind loading capability. For substations, it may be redesigning facilities to withstand severe flooding or more severe flooding than they're currently designed for. Or construction of redundant paths to provide multiple sources to serve load. Objective three is centered around enhanced vegetation management practices to minimize risk or mitigate risk during extreme weather events. Its project types may include using advanced or emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, satellite analytics, or modeling to better quantify risks. And to go along with that, a project example might be adjustments that might be made to vegetation management practices that use some of that analytic data to do more predictive vegetation management practices, predictive maintenance, essentially. Another example might be reclassification or removal of danger trees. Danger trees are defined as trees that are outside of a right-of-way, but if they were to fall, could impact the facility. And then another one may be reconfiguration or relocation of lines to maybe taller structures or moving a structure to outside of a risk zone. And then objective 4 is the development of energy storage or microgrids specifically for resiliency applications. So the project types may be development of microgrids in general in areas that may not have them for specific communities, or installation of battery storage at substations to supply if the source is cut off or unavailable for some reason due to an extreme event, or the installation of distributed resources at critical facilities or customer locations. These critical facilities may include hospitals, schools, emergency management facilities, those types of installations. So those are the 4, just a broad overview of the 4 different objectives. I'll go in now to the public hearing that was conducted on November 7th of 2022. It was conducted via Zoom. We had a pretty robust, I think, turnout. A lot of positive feedback and a good, I think it was a good hearing. We had 67 individuals register. 48 of those individuals participated. About half represented the electric cooperatives within the state. About 17% represented municipalities within the state, and the rest were essentially other interested parties. So the feedback we received on the recommended project types. So we asked the attendees to rate the importance of each project type. I think we got positive feedback on all of the project types, but the hardening or adapting the electric system project was by far above the rest as far as importance rated by the participants. With increased monitoring and control and the vegetation management project types running kind of a close second and third. And then development of energy storage and microgrids was kind of a distant fourth, but it was still relatively high importance to each of the participants. And then finally, we asked the participants how would they rate the value of the meeting. We got high marks in that. There were a few outliers that were just, I guess, indifferent to the value. And then we also asked them about their ability to share ideas and basically participate and interact during the meeting. And they were relatively positive on that front as well. So I'll turn it back over to Mr. Edwards to finish off.
Thank you. So our next steps for proceeding forward, it will be to create a program where those eligible entities can submit an application to Santee Cooper in a period of time, and we will collect all of those applications, review, and determine which ones should be selected for that particular year. Again, this is a 5-year program funded for 5 years. The actual projects themselves are allowed to go for a total of 5 years each. So that would be 1 year, one program 1 year could last 5 years. But that also will depend on what other applications we receive and how that turns out and whether that really helps the state of South Carolina or which ones fall in order of priority. As it is set forth in the statute and as we will set forth and make sure the applicants know, there is an expectation that these be state focused, that these projects remain in the state of South Carolina, and they will be prioritized by the greatest impact they will have towards grid resiliency. There is a requirement in the statute that we set out or set aside 34.6% of the overall total, that $5 million total, must be set aside for these, what is considered small utilities. We have a list there to show you the size of these utilities. All of those utilities on that list would be eligible to apply, but at least that 34.6% of the funding amount will be set aside for use by those small utilities. As you saw from Mr. Wagner's presentation, a lot more interest came from those small utilities. That doesn't mean we have to limit them to that 34%. They can apply for even more of that. This is a floor for those small utilities. And we certainly expect to have a lot more interest from those small utilities. At least we're planning for that. Santee Cooper is also going to utilize, we haven't finalized, but we're going to utilize an outside consultant to assist with arranging sort of the administrative work for accepting and reviewing these applications, as well as some of the back office administration that must be done. As with any federal grant, these will be audited after the grant awards are provided. And we intend to have a very solid program that is consistent across each year, where the process is known to all of those applicants and very transparent with those applicants. Santee Cooper is also, while it is eligible to apply, will not be applying at least during the first 2 years. Our interest is to make sure that those other eligible entities apply for these funds, and that there is complete transparency among those who are eligible to participate. Again, the function of all of this is to help for the benefit of the state of South Carolina, the grid resiliency, and we look forward to working with all those potential applicants. As of today, these funds have not been distributed, to our knowledge, to any state. The funds have been made available to the Department of Energy, but they have not distributed to any of the eligible states. And Santee Cooper, on behalf of the state of South Carolina, has not received these funds yet either. That draws our presentation to a conclusion. We are happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
I think we were provided 2 other documents and you referenced them, but would you just describe those for our record,
Absolutely.
please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. The first that I will describe is the larger packet of information. That's the Administrative and Legal Requirements Document, otherwise known as the ALRD. The federal government, on behalf of the Department of Energy and some of their consulting work, hands out that document for all grants. That document helps to provide assistance to us, Santee Cooper, those who are performing this administrative function, but also sets forth more detail. As I said before, the statute was very general, very broad in what it would allow. This is the Department of Energy's way of being able to tighten up those expectations a little bit more on behalf of the federal government, what they expect these funds to be used for, and how we, on behalf of the state, should be managing and administering the program. So it just provides that extra level of detail to all of us. And it is consistent. It would be applicable to all states or tribes. The other item is the governor's letter. This is the letter that was signed to provide Santee Cooper with that authority to act on behalf of the state to administer these funds for this particular grant.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioners, Commissioner Justin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I got a couple of questions for you, and I'm going to rely on ORS to make objections in case I'm going outside of the scope. I didn't hear you mention the Justice 40 initiative. Have you all identified the disadvantaged communities that should receive 40% of the benefit of these funds?
So the Justice 40 is absolutely a part of this grant, and that was the disadvantaged communities that Mr. Wagner was speaking of. That is when we are receiving the applications and reviewing those applications, that is absolutely a point of review that will be conducted as each application is written, is ensuring that that applicant is aware of the requirements for that and is thoughtful as how they plan to proceed. So each application is going to include information that for example, a co-op believes they must, how they are going to operationalize the program or the project that they're putting forth. And they must include how that initiative fits within their project. Each and every application will contain that information, and Santee Cooper will be basing its decision on how that is referenced in their application.
Thank you, sir. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I really understand the definition of what a disadvantaged community is. I've seen poor people, elderly people, disabled people, ethnic minorities, women, but it's or a community that has been overburdened with pollution. It seems to be pretty broad. How are you all interpreting that and putting that in the application so that those applicants can hit that target?
I would agree with you. It is broad. And I think in this particular instance, as these funds are being made available to the state of South Carolina, we need to apply that towards what it is in the state of South Carolina. In addition, who was hardest hit, not only by these natural disasters, meaning not only just along the coast, but when there is an event that impacts our communities, how long does it take for those communities to get back online? Those may be some of the more rural areas and some of the maybe more economically distressed areas. And so that is absolutely what we are going to work with our consultant on, creating a more of a scale is to administer that type of focus that may come from those applicants.
Who's the person that will serve as the enforcer or executioner, if you will, to make applicants nervous about not meeting some of these targets and providing some accountability on the back end? And I ask that question not to be a cynic, but we hear about so many different programs that are abused, and you don't hear about it until all the money is gone and the intended communities are still suffering. How do you all plan to make sure that that doesn't happen with these funds?
It's a very important question. Thank you. Yes, what's going to take place is before anyone is able to apply for these funds, we will set forth the rules of the road. And there is going to be a very transparent and active reporting requirement on behalf of the applicants, whomever they may be, where there will be regular reports being made, what is being used for these funds. And in a lot of these instances, the funds will not be used to go out and pay for services. They would be used to reimburse the services. So the services will have already been applied, and we would be reimbursing based on the receipts that are provided back. And so that's one way to make sure there's nothing untoward going on with those funds. But it's also not only the responsibility of Santee Cooper, but the federal government is going to be auditing this information and the management of that program. And so we, Santee Cooper, must create this program and must inform all of those applicants that we expect and we will be receiving those reports, or the funds will not be made available. And certainly that doesn't mean that anyone would be remaining to be eligible for future years if they cannot comply with the requirements that are set forth.
Thank you, sir. My last question for you is this. Obviously, we have my last question for you is this, and I'll preface the question with a statement. Obviously, the commission has a very limited role in regulating Santee Cooper, so I want to acknowledge that and thank you all for coming here, because you could have just said no, quite frankly, but I'm glad you didn't. When you administer this program, my concern, just listening to you, you sound like gatekeepers, and that's fine. But in my experience, I've noticed that sometimes if there's not some deliberate or intentional or purposeful action up front, that the outcome cannot be, or it can be a good outcome, but not as good as it could have been if we were thinking about the end in mind when starting. And I'm really thinking about the poor people. When I think about a disadvantaged community, I think about poor people. When I was in leadership South Carolina, we selected Allendale and surrounding areas to do a service project for. And during our economic development class, we learned about all the great economic development going on in certain parts of the state, but none of it was in what we call the corridor of shame or places like Allendale. Not to pick on Allendale, but just using it as an example. Considering that you have the Justice 40 initiative in place, and you all are well aware, I don't know if you all are from South Carolina or not, I'm assuming that you are if you work for Santee Cooper, knowing that you're familiar with the state, you know our state's problems, is it possible to try to identify some of these areas on the front end and maybe use the technical assistance? Now, when I think of technical assistance, I'm assuming that is assistance to help people apply, right? To help them apply.
That's right.
Okay. So to make sure that technical assistance is offered and available to some of those traditionally disadvantaged areas in South Carolina, so we can be a little more active on the front end to make sure those funds reach those areas. Is that something? I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Yes, sir, Commissioner, I think that is the intent. So we have been looking through the point you made earlier about it's convoluted, right? What is a disadvantaged community? What is that definition? Those are things that we're looking into and trying to refine the definition, as Mr. Edwards said, for South Carolina. It may be different for different areas. There are different tools that we've looked at to try and help us with that. Different data sets have different results, right? So we're trying to refine that and understand that. And I do think it will be an integral part of the upfront application process, having those conversations with applicants and trying to define those things up front. That is the intent.
I would just add that one of the foundational purposes of the grant is to assist with those that are most affected. So what will have the greatest impact for the benefit of the state of South Carolina. And that would be one factor to consider, is those that are often hardest hit, not because of the damage that's done, but because of the length of time it takes to repair those damages or to the true impact it has on those communities.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
On slide 5, you know, I was trying to read this real quick before you started. It didn't help me, but relative to resilience, you know, at least my understanding of resilience, thinking about resilience, you know, it wasn't just storms, but I think I heard you say that it did not include cybersecurity as part of that resilience.
That's correct.
Would relative to like possible physical attacks, is that included, or would that be part of it, or is that not part of it? Is it just specifically thinking in terms of storms?
The purpose of this particular subsection is mostly for what is referred to on. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses with me, but the slide that I have up on the screen there, and it does define disruptible events, and that's the focus of this subsection. There may be other sections, in fact, there are other sections in this larger bill that where funds can be applied towards cybersecurity or other types of harmful events.
But section D is okay.
Yes,
That answers that question and makes sense. I appreciate that. And I think on slide 7, and I wasn't sure I followed it totally, but the 5% for technical assistance, which I guess is hiring consultants, engineers, or whatever like that, is that?
That's right, and whatever other assistance, as was requested before, that Santee Cooper may be able to provide on behalf of those applicants. There will be a lot of administrative work that will have to be done at that level. And perhaps we can create something that can assist many of those different communities, as there's just not enough staffing and not enough knowledge of having to use grant funds. with some of those entities. And so what we're thinking is providing that assistance, not directing it, but helping to provide that assistance for others. And so 5% of the cost of that could be redeemable, but only up to 5%.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. Does that 5% come out of the already approved year one, year two money, or is that in addition to those funds?
My understanding is it would come out of the funds that are being made available. Yes.
Had another question and I didn't write it down. Give me just a second. I don't remember what it was, but relative to, I guess, just the hardening in general, that's transmission or distribution lines.
That's correct, Commissioner.
And the table or what you had up there that showed the percentages of, I guess, the hierarchy of what the stakeholders of the folks that participated, I guess, in whatever event you guys had. That was the feedback you received from those that were interested or wanting to use this in addition to ORS and folks like that. We think this would be the more important things to do. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And that seemed to be geared, what was that slide again?
Slide 17.
So it does seem, at least from that the hardened and adapt electrical system, that was something. What exactly is that? What does that mean?
So hardening would be essentially bolstering facilities to withstand a severe event. If a distribution line was built, let's say with a wood pole, maybe you go back with a steel pole or a concrete pole so that its wind loading is higher. If a substation is built maybe in an area that traditionally can withstand a 1 in 10 year flooding event, maybe you move it to a 1 in 100 year flooding event area. So those types of things, where you raise the height of equipment in the substation facility to withstand flooding events. Those are the types of things that would qualify as hardening from a system perspective.
Well, the hardening part I probably understood a tad better. I was really just trying to understand what the adapt meant.
Right, adapting the system to withstand. So hardening would be more of a design function. Adapt would be more of an implementation function on how you would carry out the design. So hardening would be the design aspect of it, and then you would carry that out through the adaptation of the system. Is that making more sense?
I wish I could tell you it did, but I know what the words mean, but I'll think about it more. But you did the best you could, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Appreciate you all being here. This is interesting stuff. I'm thinking about it kind of from the perspective of I live in Rock Hill and that area, so just kind of like how might this apply to that area? It seems to me like more applicable to the lower part of the state and hurricanes and that kind of a thing. But can you give me any ideas about what in a place like Rock Hill might qualify?
Sure. I think tornado events, severe thunderstorms, wildfire type events during drought seasons, flooding is another aspect of this. I mean, I think any of those severe weather events and vegetation is another portion. I mean, in the Southeast in general, a high percentage of disruptions in electric service are due to vegetation issues. We've got a lot of vegetation. Makes it a great place to live, but it does cause issues at some time. And so that's part of, I think those would apply to an area like Rock Hill. So this isn't just about hurricanes. This is broader than that, to include some of those other more statewide types of events.
Okay. And you talked about year one and year two and approximately 5 million or a little bit more for each of those 2 years, but this is going to be a 5-year program. So is it reasonable to say that it's going to be about 5 million a year for 5 years, or is that?
I believe that's the expectation. I believe that's how it was set up. So $2.3 billion was allocated towards the program. But again, each year they want to, there's a couple of things going into that. So they will redo the assessment based on that 5-part formula we talked about earlier. I think in addition, what the Department of Energy may be thinking about are if the states are not using all of the funds, if they're seeing a large number of funds being returned back for non-use, they may redistribute and reallocate accordingly to that. I think that's why they have not gone forward with the full total allocation by year and are rather kind of doing it on a year-by-year basis.
Okay. And what is the deadline to apply? And is there a deadline each of those 5 years, or what?
Yes, a deadline will be set for each of the 5 years. The deadline for year one and now year two has moved a couple of times. I believe it has been moved to, it's May now? I believe it's now May, where to seek the funds for years 1 and 2. And I think one of the things that we're waiting on, one of the reasons it's taking a little bit longer to fund, is they're trying to come up with the rules, how you are to use year one now that we're in year two. We're in fiscal year 2 of this program. And so I think they're trying to come up with those rules. And we're being patient and waiting to hear more from that. But we expect that each year there will be a deadline by which you have to inform the Department of Energy that you are seeking these funds. And again, this is a formula grant. It is not a competitive grant. So it's not as though the state of South Carolina would be applying in conflict or in competition with the state of North Carolina or the state of Georgia or even states in the West Coast. These funds have been distributed and allocated for each state.
Okay. So there could be a project now that you could apply for, and maybe the same entity or whatever might come back in that 5th year and apply for a different one. Lots of flexibility there.
Absolutely. The eligibility, actually, an entity may apply multiple times for different projects. So it is that broad. Our concern really was that there may be too many applying and that the $5 million doesn't get distributed to all of those participants. That might be a good problem to have. But again, one of the foundational purposes of this is the greatest impact for both the state and the areas that are being proposed to assist with each project.
So would you say you're getting the expected applications more or less, or just really didn't know what to expect? Where do you stand on that?
We have not received any applications. We have not requested those applications yet. That's part of the process that we're trying to build. There was a great deal of interest in the public hearing, as Mr. Wagner provided, and a great deal of interest from those, again, that came from what's defined as the smaller utilities. And so I think the intent of the program, which was to help really foster these things and provide some funding for projects that may otherwise not have been funded from some of these smaller utilities, seems to be catching on. That seems to be of a very high interest of those who attended the public hearing and who have contacted us sort of informally and said they'd be very interested in this. And Santee Cooper is encouraging that. Santee Cooper wants to encourage a lot of these eligible entities to apply for these funds.
Okay, and the city of Rock Hill has its own utility, so to speak. And I would assume that that would be one that would be classified as the smaller utilities that you're talking about.
That's right. Municipalities are included on that, and I do not recall if Rock Hill was one of the attendees of the public hearing, but certainly would have been invited. And we intend to keep people, and I say people, those on this list of the utilities informed of what's going on, whether they attended the public hearing or not.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, fellas, for being here today. You mentioned about Mr. Wagner about vegetation and the chance that or the money that will be available to work on some of that. And I'm going to use a haircut analogy. I spend a lot more on haircuts than Commissioner Williams does. And people always ask, well, storm after storm, why don't you put these lines underground? This is kind of a special money sort of thing, a bonus that our government has come up with and is printing from I don't know where, but there's money available. And I'm thinking in terms really of coastal communities and older communities in the coastal area. I lived in Murrells Inlet for a while and have a house now in Port Royal, and the trees are beautiful. And I cannot think of the term, but there are there's a certain term, certain kind of tree. You can't cut that tree. If you do, you're in trouble. Well, is there any real concern other than me that this may be an opportunity in some of these older communities to go ahead and I know it costs a lot more, but to put that baby to bed or to avoid topping these trees or I know it's not Earth Day, but I mean, this is kind of an unusual situation where we have money. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm having a hard time expressing exactly what I'm trying to say.
I get it. Yeah, yes, sir. So overhead to underground conversion was listed as one of the project examples as part of in the hardening category, but it's also a vegetation management tactic as well. So it's a dual role there as far as impact. So I think what you're saying is certainly valid. I think the utilities that serve those communities will need to look at the economics of doing that when you include in the potential for this grant funding opportunity to understand if it is from a reliability and an economic perspective, is it more advantageous to put those lines underground? So I think it's up to the utilities that serve those communities to apply for grant funding specific to that. But it would certainly be something that would qualify here.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners? Questions?
Chair Belser,
Commissioner Carolee Williams?
thank you. Mr. Edwards and Mr. Wagner, thank you very much for your involvement and for kind of broadening our world today. I've got a couple of questions that really were inspired by some of my colleagues' questions. I'm wondering about, you've already expressed how popular and how interested the eligible entities were. How are you going to choose one from the other? In determining who gets these funds, typically there are selection criteria. How will the Justice 40 initiative be kind of woven into that? And while I'm asking all my questions, I'll put them all out there. Is your goal to spread the money thinly to everybody, or effectively to a smaller group of eligible entities? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense, and thank you for the question. We, in reverse order, Santee Cooper has not made a determination on where these funds should go, particularly at this time. What's been required by statute is what makes the greatest impact on the state. But to that end, you are exactly right. There will be criteria that must be met so that a decision can be made. Again, Santee Cooper would like for there to be a large number of applicants with a large number of different types of projects that would benefit the state of South Carolina. That would be a good problem to have. But in order to do that, and in order to then, therefore, determine which ones do have the best impact or the most significant impact on the state, there will be criteria that will have to be met. The Justice 40 elements will have to be put into an applicant's application to address those, and that will be one factor that goes into it, pursuant to the statute. So we will be doing that. What we will be doing, though, is informing all the applicants, here is what we expect to see in those applications and how those will be graded. So there is an expectation that there will be requests for larger amounts of money and some that would be smaller amounts of money. And we will reiterate that this is a 5-year program. So a project that does not get selected in year 1 may still be eligible to be applied for in years 2, 3, and 4, and 5. So it is not intended as a one-time, one-chance opportunity. And we will be very transparent with all of the applicants. And again, Santee Cooper, in a way to show that transparency and that fairness, will not be applying for these funds during the first 2 years of the funding. I hope that answered your question.
I think it did. Thank you very much. I think my final question is, did I hear you say that you're going to start taking applications in May of 2023?
No.
Okay.
I think what was the question that was asked was, originally the question was, does each funding year require Santee Cooper to request those funds from the federal government? The answer to that is yes, and that has been extended through to May. We have not started to accept applications. We have not reached out or really finalized that process. That's what we're going to utilize the consultant to help us build.
Awesome. I'm glad I asked, and I understand, and I wish you all good work and best wishes. It sounds like you've got good work ahead of you and good philosophy in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'll yield to
Commissioner Irvin?
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us this morning and outlining the parameters of this new grant opportunity. Just to get a little bit better understanding of who can apply, is it limited to small utilities only in South Carolina, or is it open to nonprofits? Or explain to me, who can apply?
So there are eligibility requirements. It is limited. Our program is limited to the state of South Carolina, but it is not just small utilities. There are types of entities that are eligible per the statute, and they would be those entities that routinely participate in the electric grid or electric grid operators. That's on slide 9 of your presentation. In addition to that, the utilities that we listed later in that program do include the large utilities and, of course, again, Santee Cooper and municipalities and others.
Are the investor-owned utilities allowed to apply for funds?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And they were invited to join the public hearing as well. They're aware of this program.
Did any of the investor-owned utilities send representatives to the hearing?
I do not believe they participated, but they have been made aware of this, and they may actually be more willing to participate in future years.
And tell me how you went about selecting your consultant to assist you with the process.
We sought those consulting teams that have an area of expertise dealing with, number one, federal grants, and more particularly that may have awareness of operations within the public utility space, and so familiar with grants, grant funding, and more particularly grant administration. That's what we really wanted the assistance with, as well as an awareness of this particular grant or the types of activities that would be surrounding, the electricity grid and utilities and just the operations of those eligible entities that would be applying for these types of programs.
Okay, that sounds good. Has anyone tried to prioritize kind of a list of potential projects that would, in terms of impact? Because, $5 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you spread it across the state as large, and a number of applicants, it may not go that far to meet needs. I'm just wondering, is there a way to rank or prioritize the needs? Is that something your consultant's going to assist you with, or is that something you're going to do internally?
You are exactly right. And I think that was one of the thoughts that we had initially. At first glance, $5 million seems like a tremendous amount of funds. But when you look at what these programs are designed to do, that $5 million could be used very quickly. And so that is exactly what we hope the consultants will be helping us with. And we do have internal data that we could mine, that we understand where there have been certain events just because of our operations on an annual basis. But we also will utilize some of the information that we believe the applicants, like the co-ops and the municipalities, will bring in their application to help us understand altogether why their application, their project, has such a significance to the state of South Carolina and the residents those utilities or municipalities serve.
Very good. Well, I encourage you to reach out and try and take advantage of resources that are perhaps out there. I know a number of nonprofits have programs that look at needs that have risen out of weather crises, and so let's not overlook them, because they may have some good ideas in terms of how best to utilize some of these funds. But I appreciate your presentation today, and thank you for sharing with us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Commissioner Justin Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, something just came to me as you all were speaking. I respect and appreciate the fact that Santee Cooper is not applying for the funds in the first 2 years. That's correct, right?
Yes.
So just to make sure the state gets the maximum benefit from the funding, right now it seems like you're expecting for there to be a number of applicants, and the allocation for years 1 and 2 should be distributed. I think I understand that you're anticipating that.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. Is there a contingency plan just in case that doesn't happen, where Santee Cooper will then step in and say, "Hey, we don't think we're going to use those funds, or we don't think applicants will use those funds. We're going to step in and use the resources so we don't send them back to the federal government"?
Yes, it is. And you are exactly right. That would be a contingency for years 1 and 2. Santee Cooper, as we said, is an eligible entity to apply for these. And I think what we have been thinking, what initial thoughts have been on this, is that perhaps this would afford an opportunity for Santee Cooper maybe to partner directly with another smaller utility or municipality, and really achieve some of that benefit with funds that may not have been applied for. So yes, you're right. The intent of this was more of a self-imposed, we want to not make it appear, it's the appearance that we were more concerned with, that an application from Santee Cooper would somehow get the benefit of someone else, over someone else's application, from the start of the program. That was what we were trying to avoid. But to your point, if there aren't enough applications for the total amount of the funds, it would be more beneficial to the state of South Carolina to find programs and potential investments that would benefit the state as opposed to returning those funds. We recognize that.
Okay. And again, I appreciate the self-imposed stay out. But you all know just as well as I do, if someone has something negative to say about you, it doesn't matter how great you are, they're going to find a negative thing to say. And I would just hate, I have a lot of respect for Santee Cooper, and I would hate for the knowledge and expertise that the organization has to not be used on the front end. And no disrespect to any other smaller utilities, but I'm sure there's a knowledge base there at Santee Cooper that does not have to be spun up. It's ready now.
Santee Cooper would be eager to do that, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, hopefully, Madam Chair, this is the last thing for me. Considering that, what are some of the projects that Santee Cooper would be interested in?
I think, along the lines of what's been discussed already. I mean, overhead to underground conversions is a big one. That's something we're actively doing in our retail service areas. And so to the extent we could accelerate that, that would be great. Specifically where it may further impact some of the more underserved or disadvantaged areas. And then we've also talked about concepts around microgrids or ways to make to add in some resiliency from an energy supply perspective to communities. So we've talked about very conceptually projects that may fall in that bucket. So we're talking about it. We're kind of preparing for it, and if necessary, I think we could step in with something that would be effective.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wagner, I've been thinking about that question that I'd ask on hardening and adapting, and I don't want for a moment to think you did a poor job in the explanation. I'm pretty sure I'm the weak link in that chain. But having thought about it, I get the hardening part, doing physical design construction to just make it tougher, whatever you have to do to try to ameliorate the condition or the conditions that may be coming. And I was thinking about the adjust part of the adapt. And would that be more like maybe adjustment of the process, how you operate something, how you anticipate something, maybe even from a vegetation point of view, that hey, it's heading into that time of year, we need to make sure we've got this cut back. Is that more the distinction? And I'm trying not to obsess over this.
No, you're exactly right. And I've been thinking about it as well since I answered the question. I probably did a poor job at answering it. So So the way I think about it is adapting would be so for the example I gave was you're redesigning a line for higher wind loading capability, for example. Adjusting may be, instead of redesigning that line, using the same design parameters but moving the structure over to avoid a risk, to mitigate a risk. So that would be an example of an adjustment versus a hardening, or adding a switch in a line. In a short line section over to another source to provide a redundant supply. That's more of an adjustment than an adaptation. Does that help?
Yeah, it does, because I was thinking about that actually from another utility side, like, well, what does that mean? What would I do? And I guess rather than just go and design something all the time, is there another alternative that won't cost me as much money? I can just change the way I'm doing it or do whatever.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. No more questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Caston. Mr. Edwards, on slide 19, there's a chart that shows the customers by large IOUs, municipalities. And I think I know the answer to this, but is that customer count and not necessarily individuals?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And I recall when we were putting this slide together, you are correct. That's customer count. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That was just, I just wanted to make sure I was looking at accounts and not people. Thank you.
Units. That's right. Yes. Yes.
I didn't
That's
think
not
y'all would
the
have
population.
I didn't think you'd have a way of knowing how many people live in each household, but
No.
I just want to make sure.
And that was not a guess. So yes, you're exactly right.
Yes, thank you. So can private business entities such as solar developers apply?
For a solar entity to apply, they would need first to be eligible on, I believe this is that slide 8? Slide 8, 9, sorry. They would need to be eligible in those circumstances. There are other, as I was saying before, there are other grants made available where maybe it's more appropriate for solar entities. But what we have been talking about internally is there may be, as this program develops and matures, a way to help bring in some of those renewable energy type functionalities within the structure of this hardening and infrastructure resilience pieces. I think that may be one of those areas where those types of entities can partner perhaps with one of the applicants. And we look forward to that kind of thought.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Irvin?
thank you. Gentlemen, one thought occurred to me, in terms of receiving applications. I would encourage you to consider the possibility of allowing an applicant to offer a match, which would essentially make the money go further than it or otherwise would. And what I'm saying here is, for example, let's say a water company, small water company situated in a vulnerable area that's prone to flooding and has poor numbers on water quality. If they came to you and says, you know, we've got a really dire need here, we'd be willing to match dollar for dollar any money we get from the grant to improve our system, and here are the specifications how it would improve and our level of service and harden our system to storm damage. Is some kind of match like that? Is that something that you might explore just to make the money go further?
Yes, so I'll respond to that in two different ways. One, there is a required, per the statute, match. If you're a large utility, a 100% match. And then if you fit within that small utility definition, it is 1/3 of the subaward amount. So there's a required match. The other way I would respond to that is any applicant could put in a request for a certain amount of funds to go towards a project. Those funds do not have to be 100% of the cost of that project. And so it may look better in an application if they say, for example, this may cost us $6 million. This project itself may cost us $6 million, but we're only applying for $3 million or 2.5, indicating that they will be taking on more of a burden of the cost of that particular project. That is something that could occur in those applications, though not required.
Very good. That's very good. I'm glad to hear you've already thought about that, and it's kind of built into the process. So appreciate that. And finally, there must be some resources, state by state, national resources that have already gone through and identified certain needs in terms of hardening and strengthening the utility grid. For example, FERC probably has some standards that they have either required or recommended for investor-owned utilities as it relates to grid hardening. And there have been other, nonprofits. I'm sure Berkeley Lab has done studies on them, as have many others. Are you all going to take advantage of perhaps mining that information to do an assessment of where the greatest need might be in South Carolina?
Yes, sir, Commissioner. That's kind of, for us anyway, that's routine, kind of standard business practice for us. I mean, we follow the FERC recommendations and how they filter into the numerical reliability standards, as well as some of the national lab information and how that's being utilized within the utility sector. And so that's something we keep up with, and those practices, maybe more generally, but those practices would be part of how we would evaluate the applications.
Very good, because as this is being done in all 50 states, so I'm sure there's some good ideas perhaps outside of South Carolina that we haven't thought of. We might learn from what the true best practices might be, and that way we know that the limited money that's coming through federal program gets to the right need, and that was my concern. It sounds like you're on top of it, and again, thank you for your presentation today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Mr. Wagner, Mr. Edwards, I'd like to thank you for your presentation today. You've given us some very informative knowledge or information, and we really appreciate it. We've been hearing about these grant programs, and so we appreciate what Santee Cooper's doing to facilitate this to help the state. So thank you. Is there anything else y'all have to add?
Nothing. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time. Appreciate that.
Ms. Rainey, is there anything that from our neutral designee?
Nothing from ORS.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. With that, we'll close this allowable ex parte communication briefing. And once again, thank you, gentlemen. We are adjourned.